James Franklin has been accused of interfering with medical decisions on players from team doctors. All right, so if you're not aware of this story's been out for about a week now. Like I said, it broke while we were in the middle of an episode last week, but essentially what's going on here is there is and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but there is a former Penn State doctor who is in court right now, and he's talking about what has gone on at Penn State when he was there. And one of the things that he brought up is that James Franklin would push players to play even when they were injured. And there was a large story that came out about how James Franklin wanted to get a player to revoke his scholarship because of mental health issues, and he had attempted to jump out a window to commit suicide, and he still wanted to revoke his scholarship even after that, kick him off the team, that kind of stuff. So obviously, not a great story for James Franklin here, but at the end of the day, like, it's not like James Franklin is in court. It's not like he's here defending himself. Don't get that twisted. This is just a story that's come up in court. James Franklin isn't there himself, but On3 picked this up, got to talking about it, the whole story with the suicide and stuff like that. And I want to be completely open, suicide is a very real subject that needs to be talked about and needs to be addressed, and we need to make sure that people who are having those kind of thoughts are cared for, and we're not treating them poorly. I have my thoughts on the situation, but Andrew, as our resident Penn State fan, and this team and you cover this more than anybody else here, so I'll give you the floor first on just your thoughts on this whole situation and what's going on with James Franklin.
Yeah, so I'm going to do my best to kind of vocalize all this because I'm obviously not super well versed in law, so
right. None of us are lawyers here. Yeah.
I'm going to try to talk about everything to the best of my understanding. But, when I'm thinking about this whole story, I'm trying to just remind myself that we need to remember the facts. And the facts are that these are allegations. Neither James Franklin nor the athletic department are on trial here. This was discussed as part of a wrongful termination lawsuit that was filed against Penn State Hershey Medical Center. And the doctor who is filing this lawsuit previously filed a lawsuit in 2019, which didn't go anywhere because of a couple of reasons, but now has revised his lawsuit and has removed figures like Franklin, Sandy Barber, and a couple others. And so now is directed at the Penn State Hershey Medical Center, like I said, as well as his former supervisor, Dr. Black. And so at the end of the day, if I had to encompass all my thoughts about this, is it a good look? Absolutely not. But there's still a lot of this story that still needs to be told and is still being hashed out in court. Again, not between this doctor and Franklin, between this doctor and his former employer, which was Penn State Hershey. And so this doctor is claiming that he was removed from his position in 2019 because he was disagreeing with Franklin's supposed involvement and trying to coerce this doctor to medically clear certain players to come back in and play. And this includes some of the most high profile players that Penn State has had over the past decade. And so when you start to peel back the layers, though, things kind of start to unravel a little bit, because when you think about the timing of when he started to voice these concerns, they happened after he was notified that he was going to be removed from his position in 2019. The reason why Penn State Hershey and the powers that be, the reason that they gave to him as to why he was being removed and replaced was because they were going with a physician who was based in State College, as opposed to his home base in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and 45-minute drive away from Penn State. And this doctor was only at State College on campus part of the time. He wasn't there all the time during the week. He was traveling to and from, and that caused some communication issues. It caused some miscommunications, which then escalated into some heated discussions about what is or what is not his recommendations. There's some instances, even with Saquon Barkley in his breakout season in 2015 when he came on as a freshman. He suffered a high ankle sprain. And so Dr. Lynch assessed him, and for the next game, he was kind of questionable. He basically said something to the effect of, he's not cleared to play, but if it were a bowl game, he'd be cleared to play. And so then Franklin goes to him and says, okay, well, is he cleared or not? And so instead of him trying to say, no, clear him, he's ready to play, he's trying to get some clarification on what exactly his medical recommendation is. And again, that doesn't prove or disprove anything here, but it just seems like there's less of him trying to coerce the medical staff and more trying to get, on the same page as the doctors who are looking after these student athletes. Because, quite frankly, and I've been on this soapbox here long enough, so I want to get both of your thoughts here as well. My thoughts are that Franklin has several blind spots as a head coach in college football, but based on past experiences, caring about players' health and safety is not one of them. There's a good handful of instances where players have had to deal with very, very serious medical issues, some of which have forced them to medically retire. And Franklin has been publicly outspoken about supporting them, keeping them within the program in any capacity that he can. Landon Tangwall is a great example of this, who had to medically retire before this past season took place. There's even examples, if you want to go all the way back to when his starting safety underwent one of the worst injuries that he could have experienced, went through a surgery, ended up getting an infection that nearly threatened his life. And the words disqualification or removal of scholarship, those things did not enter the discourse. So I'm not saying these to prove or disprove anything here. I'm just saying there's some past history of Franklin being sensitive to these things. So if he truly was so callous to, say to a player who was experiencing extreme mental health distress, just get him out of here, that's damning. That's just the mark of a horrible human being. But there's not really a lot of history to support that having taken place, or at least, history of Franklin doing things of that nature. So those are kind of my thoughts here. I have a bunch of notes, but I don't want to monopolize this conversation. So one of you guys can go ahead here.
Before we give it to Zach, I do want to make one clarification. Not that anything Andrew said was wrong. Everything Andrew said was right. But when we talk about revoking somebody's scholarship because they have to medically retire, that does not mean they no longer have the scholarship at all in college. That just means that the scholarship is given back to the football team, that they can reuse that in such a way, especially in this era of transfer portal, that becomes an important thing that you can use. Whether you're going to go sign a recruit or sign a transfer, that student still keeps the scholarship for them to be able to go through school. I don't know if that makes it better or worse for anybody. To me, it sounds better than he gets a scholarship taken away altogether and he has to quit Penn State and can never come back. It's not exactly that. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, and I appreciate the perspective that you're giving, Andrew, because I think we kind of joked about it at the beginning. I think whenever you see a big story like this, they jump on it and they give an immediate reaction. And I think what you're saying is we don't know all the facts. James Franklin's track record is not does not kind of flow in this direction. And so certainly it could have happened. And I don't think any three of us, I don't think would say he is certainly cleared. But at the same time, I think we're saying, hey, yes, there's maybe a little smoke, but the track record does not line up with what is being stated. And let's not forget that this is coming out in a case where someone is trying to guard their own reputation. And there are a lot of people lining up to go against this doctor in this case, including Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley, two of the biggest stars in this era of Penn State football. So I think that's just very important. And I appreciate you bringing all that to light, Andrew. I look at it a little just from a different lens, because a lot of you who listen, know me as a Big Ten football junkie. My full-time job is in ministry, and I have a master's in biblical counseling. So like I've dealt with suicide, I've dealt with mental health. I've talked through one of my alumni, like getting them to an inpatient facility at like 2 a.m. because it was like dire circumstances. And so, and I can tell you, before I got that degree, and even now, there is a lot that I do not know how to handle. Really, I'd say getting a master's in counseling just helped me know what I can and can't handle, which is, I think, an education that everybody needs these days, because I think a lot of people think they know how to handle mental health stuff, and then they get in it and you're just like, you're flooded and you have no idea what to do. And so what's to say, and I say this as someone who has talked to one of my students and said it would be good for you to take a semester off. What's to say that James Franklin did say, hey, like maybe you should not be on the team anymore, as a way of relieving pressure, because that's what was causing him suicidal ideation. Like, you just don't know. And so I think that's the difficulty with anything mental health related, and with scholarships, because yeah, could you use this for corruption? Absolutely. And I don't think, again, not saying that he didn't, but I think you have to understand too, like you're talking about stuff that like a lot of people don't know how to handle. And so you're just like, what is any relief valve that I can press? And you don't know. And so I just don't know what. I think when we start to hear, oh, they mishandled mental health and they were kicking him to the side, I'm like, we need to slow down, because we just don't know what James Franklin was walking into. We don't know what he was trying to solve. Like, and all we know is we have this other doctor who got fired 5 years ago and is now trying to fight for compensation and his reputation back. So I know that's me saying, hey, be patient, but that would be my message is mental health is tricky. It's you don't know what's going to be helpful for a person. And even if you try to help them, you might screw it up. And so let's back off and see what else happens before anyone rushes to judgment. I think anyone calling for James Franklin's head at this point needs to be quiet and get like stuffed in a room until more facts come out.
Well, like, I mean, there was a whole nother coach in the Big Ten who dealt with a player having suicidal thoughts, mental health issues on his team, and that story came out from his athletic department. I'm talking about Ryan Day at Ohio State, who had a 5-star center coming in, Harry Miller, who had issues with mental health and who had suicidal thoughts and those kind of things. Very, very serious thing. And if you recall back to what happened, it was very quiet throughout the entire year. And Ohio State was able to keep that story in-house, and they were then they were able to release it to the media as they saw fit and as they wanted to. By no means am I saying that anybody lied about the Harry Miller story or anything like that. I'm just saying that let's also consider how the story is being released, right? This is being released, as Andrew pointed out, by, somebody who is a former employee who is upset with the university and wants to try and, degrade, whether it's the university, James Franklin, whatever it is, they want to try to degrade that so that way they win in court. This is completely different than some other ways that we can get these stories. And I'm not saying this is the case, but for all we know, this could be a very similar thing to what happened with Harry Miller at Ohio State, where James Franklin is saying, like you said, Zach, hey, maybe it's best just to take a semester off. James Franklin saying, hey, football is putting way too much pressure on you in your life. It's not worth you losing your life over. Maybe it's time to stop playing on the football team, just be a student, get rid of that stress in your life. And I could totally see how that story could be misportrayed in court or something like that to make him look like he's a bad guy or something like that. Not saying that for sure happened or didn't happen. I'm just trying to say that stories can go different ways. Andrew, in your thoughts, do you think that James Franklin is in any danger here of losing his job or getting fired or anything?
Right now, no. Just because, like, based on what has come out so far. There's still obviously some court proceedings that are going to happen. They're even happening pretty much as we speak during this week. So we'll likely hear some more. Obviously, there's some testimonies that are going to be provided by star players like we talked about before. So maybe we'll get some more information and some backstory from that. But based on what's right here, right now, like, no, I don't think that Franklin is in any danger of his job security at Penn State. Now, if like more stuff comes out and more stories leak and maybe some players come forward with some stuff, maybe we'll be having a different conversation. But as it stands right now, I don't see that happening. So it's just kind of like one of those wait and see kinds of things. And I just want to kind of echo what you said before, Zach, just in like both you guys, to be honest, like with the importance of mental health, because obviously we talk about mental health in a different light and in a different context now than we did like 20 years ago or something like that. But it was just as important then as it is now. But it's a great thing that we are talking about it, open about it, discussing it, so that we can all learn and grow together, so that we can all, support one another, help those in need, and just, be kind to one another. So I'll get off my soapbox with that, but I wanted to throw that in there.
No, for sure. Thank you so much for saying that, Andrew. Really appreciate that. Zach, before we get to you really fast, Brian Myers brings up a good point. In 2014, Ohio State, Costa Cara George committed suicide. Pressure of being a student athlete may have contributed. Costa Cara George, he was not somebody that a lot of people knew until unfortunately this happened, and not many people realize how much the memories of him kind of fueled that Ohio State run there at the end of the year, playing for him and that kind of stuff. That was tragic and very, very hard for the team and Ohio State to deal with. But that's just why I'm thankful that a lot of these universities have mental health people on staff now, and they're trying to watch out for these players and help them, not just if they're having trouble with football for mental health issues, but even as a student and those kind of things. And obviously rest in peace Costa Cara George. We hate that happened, but we're glad that we're improving and things are getting better in the situations. Zach, your thoughts on James Franklin's job security before we move on?
I mean, there should be no threat until something else comes like that. I just don't think this feels like a guy who is frustrated that he lost his job and wants compensation for it. And so I think I really agree with what you're saying, Andrew, that if players come out and like former administrative staff comes out, then I think you have a problem, right? And if you look back to Pat Fitzgerald a year ago with the hazing scandal, you had a lot of support for Fitzgerald, but you had a groundswell of certain players and people who were upset. That's what did it. That's not what's happening here. It's a former medical guy who is being disputed by other medical guys and players. I don't think this has any legs until players start to chime in. And then I think it gets hairy, but I don't think it will.
Well, there'll be players chiming in tomorrow, I believe. Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley plan to take the stand, and they've already defended James Franklin once on players playing injured and him, whether he pushes them or not. Obviously, they both defended him and said that he didn't do those things and that he was always careful with players' injuries and listened to them. And I think it was Trace McSorley. It was either Trace or Saquon. I can't remember which one, but one of them even said back in 2019, they were like, yeah, he told me not to play because like I wanted to play, but he told me not to because it didn't look like I was good enough yet, or I didn't feel good enough yet or something. So, I assume they will be defending James Franklin predominantly in that court hearing, but obviously keep an eye out for that if you're interested in continuing to follow the story. Before I move on, I just want to say one more thing. If you are somebody who does struggle with mental health issues of any kind, please do seek out help. As somebody who has seeked out help before in the past, I can guarantee you that you are going to feel like, oh, this is weak or something like that. Especially if you're a man, you're going to think, oh, this is weak of me to go get help. And, I don't need to talk to anybody. I can figure this stuff out myself. At the end of the day, admitting you need help is one of the strongest things you can do. So I fully believe that, to be able to be humble enough and say you need help, because that's one of the best ways to get help. And, that's what I think we should be willing to do, even though a lot of, not saying all men, not saying women don't do it too, but a lot of men tend to believe that they can just fix everything themselves. Unfortunately, you cannot, and it's okay to accept that sometimes we need help. And, yeah.
Well said, JR. Well said.
Thank you.